like Pluto. Once there was a boy named Richard. Now, Richard was all about soccer, and he was the big shot on his school's team. Everyone looked up to him as the best player in town. So, when this huge inter-school tournament was on the horizon, you can imagine how stoked Richard was. He was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. But then, things took a bit of a nosedive. Just a day before the big tournament, Richard ran into this guy from another school, Bob. Now, Bob was this hulking dude with biceps like tree trunks. But instead of being friendly, Bob decided to give Richard a hard time. He started poking fun at Richard's size, claiming he was too puny and feeble to stand a chance against them. Bob and his friends had a good laugh at Richard's expense, and you can bet that Richard felt like the ground could swallow him up. The next day at school, things went from bad to worse. People were giving Richard these weird looks, like they were in on some secret joke. Even Richard's own pals started agreeing with Bob, saying their team was no match for the other school's giants. That really took a toll on Richard's confidence. It was like all the air had been sucked out of his soccer ball. So, when the tournament finally kicked off, Richard's game was all over the place on the first day. Coach Raymond, the eagle-eyed coach, noticed that something was up with Richard. He wasn't his usual fired-up self, and it was throwing his whole game off. Coach Raymond pulled Richard aside and asked him straight up what was going on. In a low voice, Richard spilled the beans about what Bob had said and how it had messed with his head. Now, get this, Coach Raymond then threw this curveball at Richard by asking if he knew about Pluto. Richard was like, you mean the planet, right? But Coach had a different idea in mind. He clarified that he meant Pluto, the dwarf planet. Richard was scratching his head at this point, wondering why on earth the coach was bringing up planets in the middle of their soccer drama. So, here's the kicker. Coach Raymond went on to explain how once upon a time, Pluto was one of the gang, one of the 9 planets. But then a bunch of folks on Earth decided it didn't quite fit the bill, so they demoted it to the status of a dwarf planet. But did Pluto let that get to it? Nope. It just kept doing its thing, whizzing around the sun like it always had. The coach's message was crystal clear: be like Pluto. Don't let the noise of others get in your way. Richard caught onto the message like a pro and pumped up his team with this newfound Pluto philosophy. And you know what? The very next day, Richard and his crew played like absolute champs throughout the entire tournament. And guess what? They won the whole shebang. They were the kings of the soccer turf, all thanks to a little inspiration from the distant, resilient Pluto. So, always be like Pluto.